Oh man, the drama with this club never ends. All right, welcome back everyone to American Blues Podcast. I thought it was going to be a boring 2-week off. Any Chelsea news, international break, players getting injured, but lo and behold, we got two major things to discuss. One is Mikel came out with slightly more details on what happened with the Osimhen to Chelsea and then to Galatasaray. I thought that was incredibly interesting. And then, of course, everyone's talking about this right now. Boehly versus Clearlake. Just a drama. Man, all right. So let's get started. Number one, let's talk about Osimhen. As I said on the last episode, I felt like there was something that we missed with the story. And I think Mikel's actually come out and given quite a few details. And before anybody gets on Mikel, and he's openly said he was part of the deal. He didn't disclose whether he was going to get paid from it or not. I'm sure there's motivations on his end more so than just wanting Osimhen at Chelsea and wanting Osimhen to have a good career. But I trust Mikel more than most other journalists just because, he's openly criticized the club before. He's criticized Jackson. Like, he doesn't really hold back against the club. So when he says stuff like he's very impressed by the sporting directors, especially, I think he mainly worked with Paul and Stanley. And then he gave some details about how close we were to getting Osimhen. I trust him. And then he also especially ended with the fact that, he knows where they ended and we could easily pick up in January if need be. And that is great news. So let's go over what Mikel said, which is mainly that, he sounds like he was acting more as a mediator. And he didn't really say this outright, but he kind of said it in that he was not very impressed by Osimhen's agent. And I wasn't either with all the crap that he was saying in public about Osimhen not wanting to go to Saudi, about him wanting a certain way. It just wasn't a good look when the agents speak so publicly. But what's interesting is, he said both the club and the player had to meet in the middle. And we started off very far apart. And it sounds like we actually ended up agreeing on a wage packet that made sense. And Mikel basically said that there were just a few tiny little details that needed to be ironed out. And unfortunately, we just ran out of time because there was no time for a medical at that point. And that was that. But I think the main thing is, I think a lot of people, including myself, gave Osimhen shit for being greedy. And I even said, like, if you just want money, go to Saudi. Like, it sounds like he isn't solely focused on money. It was the way Mikel put it was that he knows his worth and he has no problem with the player knowing how much he's worth and then demanding at least that as a minimum. And I'm okay with that. If you're going to be confident, if you know you're going to be able to score goals and contribute to a team, then you should get paid. It's just a question of whether you fit into our current wage packet or not. And it sounds like after a lot of details online came out that, Chelsea put up to 7 different offers. And it sounds like on the last one, we met right in the middle and just a little few more details and it would have crossed the line. Now, the only criticism I have for this is why the hell did we wait until the final day to try to pursue this? I feel like the only way that made sense is maybe the club thought leaving Osimhen with no options but to come to us would have given them a better negotiating standpoint. And that's probably true. If you have realistically PSG and Saudi clubs on offer and they're going to pay more in transfer and in wages, it's kind of hard to negotiate a package that's just, 10 times lower than another club is asking. That's just very tough for a player to accept. So just bad timing, but hopefully this means that in January we can go back into negotiations, wrap it up, and finally we get the striker that we need. And then I thought another thing with Mikel's podcast that was really interesting is he sounded like he was very impressed with the vision of Paul and Stanley. It sounds like they had like a 10-year vision for the club. And, in the past, Mikel has said like he doesn't really know what the club is doing. Like before when we were buying players, every single one of them was contributing to the team. When he was on the team, every player was world class. You could tell they were here, they were serious. And right now we're just collecting a bunch of kids, some of whom will never see the first team at all. And because he's been so highly critical from that standpoint, it's very interesting that after the conversation that he and Winstanley had, now he's completely changed his opinion. It's like, hey, I understand the vision. I'm very excited about the vision of the club. So that's honestly a big positive from my standpoint. Mikel doesn't really have much to gain from lying about that, apart from if he's personally benefiting financially from Osimhen going to Chelsea, which if he is, so be it. If he wants to, he obviously wants this deal to go through, so he's not going to talk crap about the half of the party that he's negotiating with, but still, I feel like Mikel is a pretty trustworthy source, and he has like firsthand knowledge of what happened with these negotiations. So very disappointed that didn't go on through, especially with how close we were, it sounds like, but also very excited for the future. 6 months to a year is a lifetime in the sport, and we could end up changing our mind. Osimhen could end up changing his mind. He could end up being horribly injured. Galatasaray, he could end up just not playing well. Who knows? Who knows what might happen? But my hope is he remains the player that we all think he is, and that he still wants to come to Chelsea as much as he's told Mikel, which was he desperately wants to come to us. I think that'll be amazing if that can happen, especially with a wage packet that makes sense for the club overall and for the player. So, again, disappointed that it didn't go through on the final day, but still very hopeful. I think it's good news that Mikel is so positive about it too, someone with firsthand knowledge. Now, let's talk about Boehly versus Clearlake. Just so much crap has come out this week about how they can't see eye to eye, that they have irreconcilable differences. It sounds like Boehly wanted Pochettino to stay, while Iqbali and Clearlake clearly didn't. Boehly wants to put experts in place and trust them to run the club, and he kind of wants a hands-off approach, whereas Big Dad wants his hand in everything. They want to have the final word and everything. So I think it's important to kind of contextualize what each of them has done. So Todd Boehly came in, he was basically the face of the club. We had no sporting director at the time, so he became the interim sporting director. And because he had no clue about the sport, and he trusted Thomas Tuchel to handle recruitment. And so we bought just absolutely stupid signings in Aubameyang, Koulibaly, Sterling, just horrible choices that we're still kind of suffering from today, especially in terms of Sterling. Thankfully, we've been able to move the other two on. And then I think because Boehly recognized that he's not an expert in this, he cannot run a football club, that he's kind of gave up the day-to-day operations more to Big Dad Iqbali, who ended up hiring two different sporting directors. They're the ones behind our kind of crazy haphazard buy every single young player on extremely long contracts, sell them for, PSR profit when it makes sense. So I think it's way too early to tell if that's worked out or not. But I can say that from their model, they had dug up some absolute gems. We have Palmer because of our sporting directors and because of Joe Shields. We have Madueke. We have Malo Gusto. These three players have dramatically improved the team. And Romeo Lavia is another incredible signing. It's just, if he can stay healthy, he's really good. But then we have other really confusing ones, like continuing on with Mudryk. That's been a horrendous purchase. I think one of the worst player signings that I can remember in the past 20 years. And then there was like Zakaria, who didn't even really play. And then, Kieran Trippier-Hall seems like kind of a confusing signing, especially when we have Chukwuemeka and we're not really even using him. Yeah, so it seems like there's been some positives, and the positives have been really, really good. But then there's a whole bunch of duds that we're just hanging on to with these really, really long contracts, and we're not really sure what to do with them. So I think there's positives and negatives on both sides, right? A lot of the online chatter I've seen is behind Boehly just because he's a partner owner of the Dodgers, and the Dodgers have been the most successful baseball club in the last 10 years. Great. They also gave Shohei Ohtani the most insane baseball contract that's going to pay him even after he stops playing. It's unbelievable the amount of money they put on him. But he's also probably one of the best pitchers that I've ever seen in the game. Such a unbelievable. And for those that don't watch baseball, like it's hard to comprehend a pitcher that can hit that well. Like it's just never been seen in the sport before. So imagine if the Dodgers just basically signed their equivalent of like Ronaldo or Messi, and that's kind of what it boils down to. But, I've tried to look this up too. I actually don't know how much of a hand Boehly has in the success of the Dodgers. Again, he's only a minority owner of the Dodgers. Boehly's main thing is actually Hollywood. He mainly owns A24 Studios, which I love. I'm a big movie person, so they make some great films. But that's kind of his main thing, and it seems like sport is a side interest of his as well. But to be honest, I don't know how much of the Dodgers' success we can pinpoint on a minority owner. And someone can correct me if I'm wrong, as someone who knows Dodgers way better than I do, because I'm not really a Dodgers fan. And then to try to translate baseball success to European football, it just doesn't make sense. Like, the model is completely different. The recruitment is different. The training is different. The academies are different. Like, everything about the sport is different. We have a minor league for baseball that's very well established. It makes sense to collect a whole bunch of young players in your minor league team and then move them up to the first team whenever they're available, and then move players down if they get injured. That model is very well set up in baseball, and people can still progress. Like, they can still get better. Even if they're on the first team, they have to go down to minor league. They can still get better and make it back up. Whereas that kind of system just doesn't really exist in European football. Like, we have a loan system where you're kind of at the whims of a completely different manager and team. Who knows if a loan will really work out? And what young players need in football is true game time, not academy, not like under 21 team games. Like, they need actual game time on real clubs. And the more young players we collect, the harder that becomes to actually help them become the talents that we bought them for. Right, so I'm a little bit skeptical on this let's all hop on board Boehly train, just because he has history in sports. Now, I will say the things that go for him is, it seems like he recognizes that his forte is not in actually running a sports club, but instead finding resources and people who are experts and putting them in the same room together so they can successfully run. And he just wants to be a long-term owner to help the club succeed and to help us build a new stadium. I think that is the correct message. That's the best message that we can have from an owner. Not every owner is going to be like Abramovich, who watches like South American leagues for fun and then scouts players on his own. Like, that's not every owner. I think you can probably count on one hand the number of owners who are that passionate about the clubs they own. And yeah, I think that's a good message from Boehly. Now, on the flip side, I don't like the idea of a finance company, especially a venture capital firm that's owning a club, just because you can kind of tell what's happened with the Glazers with Man United, right? Like, they just see the club as a financial vehicle. Like, all they care about is getting their investments a return. If their investors are happy, they're happy. And that doesn't necessarily correlate with winning, right? I think either Iqbali or someone high up in the club has said that, winning is not the most important thing, but being kind of like Brighton, where you find these gems with a lower budget and creating a successful team that can compete year after year in the highest competitions, but not necessarily win them. That's kind of the model I feel like Clearlake wants. They want us to be in the top 4 so we can get the most broadcast revenue with a lower wage bracket, and to sell players for a profit when we can. I think that's the model they see. And that's a little bit worrisome. I think as fans, like, we want our club to win. Number one, we want them to win. We don't want to be like Arsenal in the last 20 years and just say top 4 is good enough, right? That's not a good place to be. And so I don't know if Clearlake can take us to the very top, which is where I want to see Chelsea back in. But that being said, I actually do agree in hindsight that Maresca was the right hire. Sticking with this system, giving this manager the players that he needs, the time that he needs, makes sense. You can immediately see just in 2 months that we have a system, we have a vision. A lot of players have come out and said, like, this manager's good. He's very good on the training field. He's good on the game day. He has an idea. He has a vision. We just need time to execute it. And the more we follow that and the more we buy players that fit that model, I think that's how we're going to get long-term success. We can't be changing managers every single season. Have one manager who's all about transition, have another one who's all about defense, and another one who's all about possession and counterattacking. Like, this doesn't make sense. Like, we need a unified vision from top to bottom for us to find sustained success. So I will say that even though I don't like these really long contracts, these, buying 40 players in the last 2 years, I don't like those parts, but the first team has gotten better. We have a better vision and we have a better manager that I think can take us to the very top. I really do. So there are things going for the way, Clearlake and Igbali are doing it also. I think what ultimately is going to come down to is is Boehly going to be able to pull out like $2.5 billion from various investors, which I think he can. Like, I think it's a sports world. Like, there's plenty of people who are willing to put money into investments like that. Right. And then the other thing is it going to be enough to show Clearlake that, hey, we rather take the cash now, get a cool little return on investment instead of wanting more in the long term. And right now it seems like they're kind of at a standstill with that, but somebody's going to have to break, right? Because this current way just doesn't work. I think the biggest issue right now is that we have two different visions from the owners, and you just can't have that at a club. You cannot have too many cooks in the kitchen, right? That confuses the sporting directors, that confuses the players, that confuses everything. Like, if we don't have a unified vision from top to bottom, then the club will be a mess, and we have been a mess for almost 3 years now. I think ideally what I would like to see happen is probably Boehly take over, but to keep our current sporting directors and especially Joe Shields, right? I think the message should be, let's stop buying all these teenagers. Let's focus on players that can actually help the team. Now, they could still be young, right? They could still be raw talents that can immediately help the team in ways that we need, instead of, having the fourth and fifth player in one position that they're never going to get game time. No, we should be buying players that can help the team. Now, if they're young and cheaper, I'm totally fine with that. It's not like Man City goes out and buys the most expensive player every season. In fact, they don't actually tend to do that. They tend to find players that other people have overlooked but fit their system incredibly well, and then they become world beaters once they get to the team and get trained by Pep. That's a system that I think works the best. Same thing with the Liverpool. Edwards has done an incredible job with that team when he was there the first stint around, of unearthing really good, cheaper talents and making them into superstars. And I think that's the model to follow, right? So like I said, I think ideally it would be Boehly taking over, but keeping our current structure so we don't have another sudden change, but to cut out all these crazy teenage buys that will never help the team, right? I think that would be ideal. Now, is that going to actually happen? I have no idea. Unfortunately, Boehly only owns 39.5%, while Clearlake owns 61.5%. So money kind of talks, right? Like, if Clearlake, which is run by a board, if that whole board is just like, no, we're not going to sell, and we have the capital to buy you out, then there's really only one way this is going to go, and we're kind of stuck with the only Igbali show, which, yeah, it's a little worrisome. But again, I don't think it'll be the end of the world, because we have a better team today than we did a year ago, right? And we have a better manager today than we did a year ago. So I think there are positives. I don't think it's this whole doom and gloom that the media just loves to jump on Chelsea. Like, any bit of controversy, they just love shoving it down the fans' throats. Just how much money we spent, what a mess we are. They love that, and they get the clicks, they get the views. That's what they're about. I don't think it's that dramatic. I think it's just simply a case of there's a majority owner, there's a minority owner. They both have stakes in running the club, and they both have very different visions. And it's gotten to a point where they just agreed that this isn't going to work, and they need to find a solution. And the only solution is one of them has to leave, right? So it'll be interesting to see how quickly that happens. Nothing that big will happen quickly. I guarantee you this is going to drag on for weeks to months, maybe even the whole season. But I think at the end of the season, we'll see one side have full power over the other. And I guess we're just along for the ride. But in the meantime, what I don't want to see happen is I don't want Maresca fielding questions about the owners. That's not his job. He should have zero opinion on what the ownership does, right? That's so far above him. That is not where his focus needs to be. His focus just purely needs to be on the next game, training the first team, and making us better, and hopefully getting more points. So it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out. See you guys after the international break. Peace.